Welcome back, Canada Catholic. So y'all just left about 10 minutes ago. I was kind of fixing this presentation up a little bit, getting it right. I'm going to try and keep it not too long, but I make no promises. Now, anyway, really quick, let's pick up where most of us left off in class. If some of us didn't get here quite yet, or if some of us are a little past this, that's fine. Okay, it's not a big deal. So, but let's pick up right here. So we started talking about Sparta, right? Now, keep in mind, when we were talking about the Archaic Greeks a little bit ago, we were talking about the similarities that even Spartans and Athenians share, right? We were talking about how there are a lot of things that define the Archaic Greeks, like their art, their trade, their soldiers, their religion, things like that, right? So, getting into it, though. Now we got to talk about the big two powerhouses, right? Sparta and Athens. And talk about their main big cultural differences between the two of them. First and foremost, the Spartans were settled by the Dorians, right? Now keep in mind, the Dorians were always considered the people that caused the Greek Dark Ages. The time of unlearnedness, right? The time when art and intelligence went downhill, okay? They also, though, marked the end of the Bronze Age and the introduction of the Iron Age, so you got to give them credit for something. But it is claimed that the Spartans were settled by the Dorians. They're on the mainland area of Greece in the region of Peloponnese, where Mycenae used to be. They also, this was a cool system, they did not believe that any Spartan man was to have any job other than being a soldier. If you are a Spartan male child, you are a soldier. If you are a Spartan woman, you are meant to give birth to soldiers, right? It is a militaristic society, period. If Omar is a Spartan man, he is not going to be a blacksmith. He's going to be a soldier. Hypothetically, if Khalil's like, but Dad, I just want to dance, right? No way. You got to be a soldier, guy, all right? That's what it has to be. But let's say, hypothetically, when we went out and took over somebody. We took over Mr. Keogh's class, right? So we took over him. When we bring him back to our settlement as a slave, we're going to call him a helot. And we're going to force him to do all the jobs that we believe Spartan men are too good to do, right? So they do the farming. They do the smithing. They do craft work, things like that, right? Spartan government, though, also consisted very differently from Athens of two autonomous kings, right? And a council of elders. Now, ironically enough, the council of elders is like slightly above them. And I used to know the name of this council. If one of y'all can find out the name of that council of elders, okay, then I'll give you extra credit if you come tell me first after activity period ends tomorrow. It's like one kid per class, all right? One kid per class. Now, anyway, so check it out. Citizens were believed to be all Spartan-born males over the age of 30. Now, somebody's like, Mr. Terry, I thought that, Spartan women had more rights than Athenian women did. Like, why weren't they citizens? Greeks were kind of always politically oppressive to women, right? So we'll get to that stuff again when we get back to Athens, though, but just keep that in mind, right? So everyone else, though, was considered a subject of the Spartan Empire, right? So now the really cool thing about the fact that they had two kings, though, is the fact that there's a great part of it. It's a checking and balance system, right? One of them leads the government. The other one is the leader of the military, right? So there were other jobs that were outside the realm of Spartan men. Some of the older retired ones would become politicians and things like that. But the idea of the soldier and the army being the body and the blood of Sparta is still a thing, right? And there's, what's his face? Oh, God, I can't remember what that actor's name is. Anyway, now check it out. All newborns, though, this is a really cool thing about Spartan society. Terrible if you're underweight, but a really cool thing. All newborns were actually checked by a government inspector, right? So let's say, hypothetically, who am I going to mess with right now? Let's say, hypothetically, oh, man, I'm blanking. Brandon, his family just gave birth to a little baby boy, right? And he's right here. I'll look at him, right? Little Craig, right? Here's Craig. Now, anyway, so Craig would have to be inspected by a government inspector. Me, right? I would show up upon the birth of the child. I'll be like, all right, I'm going to take this baby, and I'm going to go out into the woods, all right? And I'm going to go check it, okay? So here's the problem. Brandon's child has no heads, no arms, no legs, and is shaped oddly like a football, right? So, and it's very underweight. So what I would do is just leave that child in the woods for the wolves to eat it, right? So that's a very common practice. They don't throw them off cliffs like they did in 300, but they were abandoned to die, right? So checking of infants was a big deal. But if you pass that checking certification, at the age of 7, you were inducted into military training, right? Immediately inducted into military training. So this right here is a young man, of course, in the movie 300 being dragged off by government inspectors to begin his military training, right? So other cool things about this, though, is first of all, when they trained in the yard, they trained completely in the nude, right? And they did this because they wanted you to be able to understand the sting and the cut of a blade without armor on, right? So it actually made them much more strong, much more virile. Now, they would eventually move into the barracks, and they were toughened up by a really coarse diet, extremely hard exercise, right? Very, very rigid discipline. Now, to develop sneakiness, this is always a really cool thing. You don't have to write this down, but it's like super cool, right? So to develop sneakiness, boys were encouraged to steal food from the officers. So let's say, hypothetically, I'm an officer, right? I'm up here, I'm up front, I'm doing my thing, and then one of my males, we're all eating together, right? And they bring in my meal, and it's goat. Not curried goat, that's from India. It's goat and then like barley and some grains and some eel on the side. And I'm like, yeah, look at that meal, right? It's going to stick in my bones. It's going to make me strong. But then hypothetically, I'm looking out over all of my young male soldiers, and all of y'all are eating stuff closer to like what I would probably feed somebody like, oh, I don't know, Nigel or Gabe, right? Gabe and Nigel are sitting over there, and they're eating what Spartan soldiers were given, which was a blood soup, right? It was barley, lamb's blood, and vinegar mixed together. Or anyway, and that's what they were given because it was cheap and it was easy to like give, had a lot of vitamins, a lot of nutrients in it. They're sitting there eating that. Well, I'm gonna be like, I gotta get up, I gotta go to the bathroom, right? So I get up and go, and Nigel looks at Gabe and he's like, hey, Gabe, I bet you won't go steal that food, right? Gabe's not sneaky. He goes up, he gets caught, gets beat, right? Nigel, on the other hand, while Gabe is getting beat, sneaks up, snacks some food, eats it, right? That was encouraged. You were encouraged to try and sneak food because it made you more cunning, right? Now, at 20, men were allowed to go off and marry, but they actually had to live in the barracks for another 10 years. Up until the age of 30, they had to live with their military unit, right? So, anyway, now let's talk really, really quickly about Spartan women, all right? Very revered in Spartan society. Women in Sparta were required to exercise every day, and they were revered as the givers of life and the creators of soldiers, right? Jot this down. There were only two ways to get a tombstone in Sparta. If you died in battle, if you gave birth to a soldier, right? So they were required to exercise and meet up every morning to strengthen their body so they actually produce strong warriors. They were also allowed to inherit property. They had to listen to their husbands in the long run. However, they were allowed to inherit property, and they were actually allowed to carry that property into other marriages and things like that. So, and remarry following these things. I don't really know about divorce practices in Sparta. I'd have to look that up. I doubt they were really a thing, though. Now, anyway, but to keep going, though, the Spartans are also going to isolate themselves away from the other Greeks. They're not going to really seek out a lot of allies because they're Spartans, right? They are not, citizens were not allowed to trade. That is things that were left up to people like helots and politicians and stuff like that. Because remember, a citizen is a Spartan-born male over the age of 30. Okay, so citizens were encouraged not to trade or travel, and also this made them very unique and very deadly because they did not cross over with the Athenians until much later in their development, right? But speaking of the Athenians, let's get into those people. The Athenians are much more considered like they're ruled by the people. If Sparta is varsity, then Athens is the honors nerd herd, right? The people that move from class to class together. The Spartans and the Athenians are wildly different. Athenians are known for their intelligence and their government, whereas the Spartans are known as their military dominance. All right, so anyway, right here, that is the Acropolis of Athens, right? This is a very, very famous building that many of you already know of, the Parthenon, right? The Parthenon. Just jot Parthenon down somewhere. P-A-R-T-H-E-N-O-N. Put a star next to it and then a smiley face and then a small explosion and then underline it 3 times. That's how I'm going to catch people muting me. All right, anyway, now, but check it out. The Parthenon is a very, very widely revered piece of Greek antiquity. It is believed to be one of the best representations of Athenian ingenuity, right? So, but anyway, they claimed, this is funny, this shows you the cultural split between the Athenians and the Spartans, right? The Athenians believed that they were better than the Spartans. They were like, we're not even settled by the same people. We're settled by the Ionians. They're a sea-dwelling people, and they're super smart, and they're not responsible for the economic downturn of the Greek Dark Ages like the stupid Dorians are. They said that they were actually settled by the Ionians, right? So they start out originally as an aristocracy. An aristocracy is when a wealthy class of landowners are actually in charge, right? It's actually 4 families. And these 4 families actually came up with all these rules, like, for example, You can or can't marry orphans or daughters of certain families. We have to have all the same religious practices. We have to be buried in the same areas, right? They isolated themselves away from society and ruled from above everyone else, right? Wealth, due to these things, though, since they control a lot of the trade, is going to grow very, very fast among the upper class, right? It's going to grow very, very fast. They are going to pull in many other small Greek settlements, and they're going to create one large city-state with a very, very small higher class and then a huge class of poor people underneath them, right? So I define the Athenians as being kind of like extra, right? I define them as being extra because they would do things that aren't quite necessary, right? Until guys like this guy came along. His name is Solon, right? S-O-L-O-N, would change government forever. This guy is known as the father of modern-day government, all right? He's crazy important. There's another guy we'll talk about in Athens later named Pericles that's just like he's awesome, all right? So anyway, but Solon, though, was appointed chief official in 594 BC. He's considered the father of modern-day government, right? He's going to do a lot of different things. You're going to have to jot a couple things down, right? You're going to have this, and you're going to have this, and then you're going to add a couple other things. You ready? All right? He's going to outlaw debt slavery, all right? What I mean by that is he made it so, let's say hypothetically, a poor person committed a crime or damaged property, right? In ancient Athens, before Solon, that person had to work off their debt, like indentured servitude, right? So let's say hypothetically, who am I going to, let's say Jocelyn, right? Let's say Jocelyn comes onto my property and destroys like a small part of my property, and I'm a very wealthy person, so I'm like, all right, Jocelyn, you have to work at my home for X amount of time until you work that debt slavery off. And while you're here, you also owe me rent, so it's kind of a really, really bad system, right? Solon's going to outlaw that, okay? He's going to be like, Athenian citizens should not be forced to work off debts. It's going to push Athens towards democracy. He's going to say the poorer populations are allowed to vote for their archon, right? That's another big thing. Archon, A-R-C-H-O-N. That's the leader of the Athenian government, right? Before that, before the voting practices, what actually ended up happening is they were selected by those four families, right, in that aristocracy. The four families were like, all right, we'll pick this person. And ironically enough, they picked Solon, and Solon kind of stabbed him in the back, right? So anyway, what's going to end up happening since Solon, though, this guy right here, he's actually going to be exiled. He's going to be exiled out of Athens, and the aristocracy tries to reclaim its dominant power, but the damage was already done. Solon's reforms are going to create legislative systems. They're going to create common voting practices, which is one of the simplest techniques you've ever heard of, right? So let's say hypothetically we had like Schlegel, right, running for office in Athens against somebody like Mark, right? Mark and Schlegel running against each other. The simplest voting practice, actually, what they did is there was one giant pot, and then there were two piles of rocks, right? There would be like a white pile of rocks and then a black pile of rocks. And if I wanted to vote for Schlegel, I'd pick up the white one. If I wanted to vote for Mark, I'd pick up the black one, drop it in the pot. Whenever they would count the votes, they'd smash the pot open and then divvy up all the rocks, right? That's how they voted. It was very, very simple. Now, democracy, though, just to give you a heads up, is a rule by representative bodies, all right? So we have a democratic republic in this country, just to give you a heads up. Only landowning male citizens, though, could participate in government. So sorry, Schlegel, you actually weren't allowed to participate. Athenian women was another big thing as well. They were not allowed to participate in politics. They ran the entire house and were very essential for many religious ceremonies. The other big thing about it, hi, Jess. So the other big thing about it, though, is they were not allowed in the agora. They were not allowed to leave home without their husband's permission. They were not allowed to do a lot of things. So women actually had much more freedom in Sparta than they ever did in Athens. They couldn't inherit property. In Athens, they couldn't inherit property. They couldn't vote. They couldn't do much of anything except run the household, right? So it's a very, very, very messed up system. Last couple things we got to talk about really quick. I know this is a long one today, but you're going to deal with it regardless, is Athenian education, right? This actually right here is a development in Greek art, right? This is red figure pottery, right? Because the figures are red. So right here you have a young man playing what you think is a harp, but it actually isn't. It's a lyre. L-Y-R-E, right? A lyre. It's much like a harp, but it's a lap lyre. And also you have another student right here receiving some of his education. They were much more about educating their children instead of teaching them at war. Boys are going to attend school if the family could afford it. They learn to read, they learn to write, they learn to study music, they memorize poetry, and they also learn public speaking. I'm going to ask you about that one tomorrow a little bit, all right? They receive some, but very little military training whatsoever, all right? And that's it. That's archaic Greece, right? Tomorrow we're going to get into the Persian Wars, right? And how that's going to usher in the era of classical Greece, right? So, I hope y'all have a great rest of your evening. I will see you guys tomorrow. Very impressed by y'all's work up to this point. See y'all after a while. Have a good evening, Camden Catholic.